Usually, there's not a day that goes by that I don't stand up and thank the heavens for people like our speaker tonight, and for their sacrifice and all the hard work. Many of you gentlemen out there make these freedoms that we take so much for granted a reality. I'd like to ask, let's start the evening off a little bit differently tonight. Would everybody please rise?
Thank you.
Thanks. Let's begin by a moment of silence for all those individuals. Today we commemorate Pearl Harbor. Those individuals who gave their life at the start of the war, a day of infamy in Pearl Harbor, but also all the individuals, men and women who gave their lives for the country, for the freedoms that I alluded to. A moment of silence. Thank you. Now, if you join me in pledging allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. A little bit of a different start to our meetings, but I thought it was well warranted. On a very special day, 65 years later. On a lighter note, we're here and very lucky to be joined by an individual who was there on that day, Mr. Ned Shanaman. And again, I usually preface our meetings with how delighted I am and how honored, and this is certainly no different, in fact, probably much more so, that we have an individual of his character and his background talking with us today. You're in for a treat. Great speaker, very interesting stories, and I won't belabor the point. But Ned started his career in the Navy before Pearl Harbor and was there in the harbor. We'll have a map and talk about his exploits, but began his career and during that day on the USS Medusa, battleship, tender or repair ship. And then spent much of the war on that ship, and then ultimately transferred to a cargo ship, a delivery ship taking soldiers into Japan. And told me one of the interesting things tonight. He said, "Listen, these people who are away from home for a few months, serving their country, they shouldn't complain." He was away 6 years and only had two leaves, one of which got him as far as Norfolk, and he ultimately had to tear up the train ticket and go right off on war maneuvers at the end of the war. So he was that close to his home and never really got there. So he said, don't be discouraged by being away from home. Consider him 6 years away from his town of Richmond. So without further introduction, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Ned Shanaman, who's going to talk about Pearl Harbor. He'll talk about that day, his recollections and his war exploits. And afterward, we'll take questions. So let's please have a warm. I should also acknowledge our own Bev. Bev, raise your hand. Bev put me in touch with Ned. She does great work with respect to Pearl Harbor Remembrance, and for
You go ahead.
Sunday was just passed. And I heard it went really well, and I wasn't there, and I apologize. You don't know what I was doing. I'll make up a false story. So, Ned,
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Loud enough?
Yes.
this is all.
Well, in 1940, a lot of you remember there were new jobs around. So I and another fella decided to join the Navy and the Marines. So we went down to Philadelphia. The Marines wouldn't take either one of us. They thought, well, we're going somewhere, so I said, I'm going in the Navy. So we went to the Navy, they took me, but they wouldn't take him, he had flat feet. So he joined the Army. And you have to wonder why the Army would take flat feet and the Navy wouldn't. So we asked for an explanation. They said in the Navy it's steel decks and that is hard on flat feet, where the ground isn't as hard on it. So they could take the flat feet and go on. Well, anyway, we left and I was assigned to Newport, Rhode Island, which was the Naval Training Station at that time. Went up to Newport. We had 6 weeks of boot camp. After boot camp, they gave you 6 days boot leave. I came home and I had to report back 2 days before New Year. After I graduated, the ship, the USS Constellation, which is the ship that's down at Baltimore Harbor right now, was the outgoing unit. And I slept on there for two weeks in a hammock. In fact, my first year in the Navy, I slept in a hammock. And actually, if you're out at sea, the hammock is the place to be. The ship rocks and you stay still. If you're on a bunk, you roll with the ship. But they did away with the hammocks after the war started. When I went from boot camp, I was sent to Great Lakes, Chicago, and from there transferred to Detroit, Michigan. And Henry Ford had built a school there to teach machinist mates. So we went to Dearborn, Michigan, and I spent, I think it was 2 months, going through the Ford plant and learning how to be a machinist mate. Now the best part was there, while you were at boot camp, you took aptitude tests. My lowest mark was mechanical aptitude. They said, you're going to machinist school. I said, I don't want to go to machinist school. You go. So I found out why we went. It was Shanaman, Slavin, Springhorn, Schultz. That's how you were picked at that anyway. So if you wanted a good friend to be with you, pick somebody that had the same initial as yours. So anyway, we went to Detroit, to the Ford plant, and we worked there right with the machinist mates making the Ford trucks and everything. After that, I was transferred to San Diego and told to report aboard the USS Medusa. We took a transport. The Medusa was already at Pearl Harbor. We went out and I was transferred from the Warden, the transport ship, to the Medusa. The first thing they do is put you on KP duty. And at that time, you didn't have the cafeteria lines. You had tables above the deck. You dropped the tables plus the chairs, and you served 12 men. That you had to run up to the galley and get your food and bring it down and serve them. It's nothing like the Navy today, I'll tell you. After you put 3 months in there as your KP duty, I finally went to the machine shop. That was July of 1941. In November, 2 days after the Thanksgiving, they said you are going out on war maneuvers. I only had a little over 6 months in the Navy, and the old salts that were on the Medusa said, we don't go out on war maneuvers. Repair ships never go on war maneuvers. But we went on war maneuvers. And we weren't supposed to return to Pearl Harbor until a week before Christmas. And we were out there sailing on the Pacific, doing war maneuvers, going to battle stations. And all at once orders came to secure from General Corps war maneuvers and return to port. And we were glad for that, but we were only who gave the orders. So we secured from General Quarters, playing war maneuvers, pulled into the harbor. Now, our position in the harbor was always where the Arizona was. And we would have been where the Vesta was, actually. But the USS Enterprise aircraft carrier needed repairs, so they told us to drop anchor off of Pearl City and wait for the Enterprise to come in. So we dropped anchor off of Pearl City, and we were waiting for the Enterprise to come in the next day. Luckily, the Enterprise was late coming in. So Saturday, we came in early Saturday morning. The port side went on Liberty. My Liberty was on Sunday. So I was all dressed up, my wives waiting to go ashore. Liberty started at 8 o'clock. While we're down in the machine shop talking to my buddies, the general alarm goes. We looked at one another. Somebody pushed the wrong button, so we didn't bother. They pushed the button again to ring general alarm, and they said, "Man your battle stations, men, this is no drill, this is war." One guy that's been out the night before, he said, "What will they think of next to get us to go to battle station?" He pulled the covers up over his head. Nobody moved. After that, now you hear planes fly around there all the time. Plane flew and you heard a loud boom and the ship rocked. We all moved then. I was down in the machine shop. My battle station was on the boat deck as a lookout. So I proceed up to my battle station. I'm standing there and the planes were everywhere. Didn't matter where you looked. And they came in, the first raid was mostly torpedo planes and fighter planes. So the torpedo planes came in, dropped their torpedoes on the battleships, flew over Fort Island, and on the return trip they strafed our ships. While I was up there being a lookout, I see these planes coming to you, and one of them was coming directly towards us. And you often see people drop when they're shooting, and I tell you, that's natural. I fell down on the deck, and we had wooden decks at that time. And I was laying there, I just heard whew, and you could see the bullets ripping into the wooden deck right above my head. When I stood up here, there was another row right back on me. I thought I was pretty lucky. And I'm standing there, another plane comes over, and he was flying that low, but his guns were at the forward end of the ship, and he looks down, I can still see his face, big smile on his face, and you could see he was Japanese. That they flew that low, you could actually see the pilots. But nobody was firing back at him. It was easy to fly that if nobody's firing back at you. The second raid was mostly dive bombers and fighter planes. And at that time, we got ammunition up to the guns, and they weren't as daring as they were for the first raid. Whenever I'm standing up there as the lookout, an officer comes up to me and says, "What's your battle station?" I said, "I'm a lookout." He said, "If they can't see him now, they're blind." I said, "I do." He says, "Go below and carry ammunition." The ammunition hoist broke down. So I run down 5 decks to their magazine, and while I'm standing down there, and I wasn't on the top side, it comes over the loudspeaker, "Submarine dead astern." The submarine. Then I wanted to be on top side. So I grabbed this 3-inch shell, and I run up to the deck where the gun is, and I look right off our stern. It's one of these 2-man submarines at the Japanese. One of them got into the harbor, but he got off course, and he's in too shallow water, and here the conning tower stuck out. Or one of 5-inch guns put a shell right through the conning tower, and a destroyer comes later on and rams it and turns it over. So I just said that was the end of the first raid. Then about 20 minutes later is when the dive bombers, and that came ashore to dive on the ships in the harbor, but not as much damage was done on the second raid as the first, because by that time we had the ammunition up and there was more firing going on. After it was all over, we just sat there, couldn't believe what happened. All kinds of rumors were spread around that the Japanese were landing on the North Shore, the water was poisoned, don't drink the water, and you couldn't believe all the things that were coming around. Well, we spent at general quarters all day. The cooks brought sandwiches up to you while you were at your battle stations. And that evening, right after dusk, it was dark, we look off in the distance, and here we see 4 planes coming in, have their running lights on. We thought, well, now why would the Japanese come and have the running lights on? Couldn't figure this out. They were getting closer and closer. They were coming in to land at Fort Allen. When they got so close, somebody got nervous and started firing, and when that one gun started firing, everybody let loose. And out of those 4 planes, we shot 3 of them down, only 1 of them landed, and then we found out the next day they were all planes coming in from the Enterprise. At that time, when carriers came into the port, the planes always flew in ahead of time and landed on Fort Allen. And that's what they were sending in, but they had no communications, and nobody knew they were coming in. The next day, the Enterprise pulled in and came alongside of us for repairs. Well, all the damage was done. I mean, the battleships were all burning. You saw pictures of it, I'm sure, of the Shaw burning up. Hit the magazine and the Shaw and blew the front end all off of there. And it was the floating dry dock, which was up above the water level. But most of the ships, I think there were only 3 of them that weren't repaired, and that was the Arizona and the Utah. So another one. Forget the other one. Yeah. But anyway, like I said, we were a repair ship, and when you looked over there, you knew you had a lot of work to do. We stayed there until April of 43. Most of the ships were brought up. The Oklahoma was, that's the other, Oklahoma was abandoned, and all the other ships were repaired and back in fighting action. On the July the 23rd, 1942, on our ship, we only had 2 anti-aircraft guns, but after the war started, they put 6 of them on. The ship's crew was small, so the repair gang had to man these guns. Now, we were machinist mates and we weren't gunner's mates. So on my 21st birthday, we went out to sea, and the machinists and the electricians were taught how to fire 3-inch guns. They made me a hot shellman. That time you wore asbestos clothes up to your shoulders on the neck, and you caught the hot shells from the 3-inch guns after they were fired and threw the shells out of the way. Luckily, we never had to use them except just for practice. After we left Pearl Harbor, we went down to the New Hebrides, and we were the first ship into Ifani, and we set up a repair base there. We stayed at Ifani for about a year, and all the ships that needed repair that were out in battle came in and alongside of us, and what we could repair took them back into action, or at least repaired them enough that they could return to Pearl Harbor for major repairs. After we were at Ifani for a while, we got orders to Stayed there for a few days. Then we went to New Guinea. When we were going up into New Guinea, and we were tied at Buna, that is one of the bases on the north shore of New Guinea. And if you remember in Life magazine, it showed the first dead American soldier lying on the beach that was taken there at Buna. While we were there, we had a terrific thunderstorm that night. But we were sitting there watching the movie, and while this was on topside, the lightning hit the ship. Luckily, we weren't tied up to a dock, and almost you could see the sparks fire off your fingernails. So they canceled the movie and told us to go below. And we were down below. The next morning, we were told that when we were ready to leave, the captain heads the ship for the buoys, and we full speed ahead, 10 knots. We went on going along, and there we hear a screech and scratching, and you could tell we were running aground. Here during the storm, it moved the buoys over on the coral reef. Our captain was right, he followed the buoys, but we sat on that coral reef for 2 days, taking supplies aft, and then 2 tugs came and pulled us off. Luckily, we found out if you run aground, you have to go into dry dock. By doing that, got us to Sydney, Australia. Now, we had been away for 13 months that we did not see anything except another sailor or soldier. We pulled into Sydney Harbour. I don't know if anybody was in there, but Sydney is one of the most beautiful harbours. We couldn't believe when we pulled in there, every ferry that went past, all the citizens on that ship stood there and saluted your ship as you went past. The Australians really appreciated the Americans helping them out down there. And when we went ashore, you couldn't buy anything. And luckily, when we were there, was when D-Day in Europe, well, they were all dead, and I'm not saying, but the war was maybe coming to an end. You couldn't buy anything. They treated us great. After we left Sydney, Australia, we went up to the Admiralty Islands. And while we were there, the Admiralty Islands is a big harbor, and the ships would come in there, and I don't know how many were there, but over 100. Luckily, I had been going in for 4 years. They finally told us you'll be transferred to the USS Wharton, a transport ship, and go back to the States. Now I'd been going 4 years then already. So we had to wait till all those other ships left. We didn't know what was going on at that time. But I was on the transport, and we were going back, and that was the invasion fleet that was going up to land in the Philippines. But I was on my way back home. I finally got home after 4 years for a 30-day leave. On the way home, I said, give me delayed orders to report to Newport, Rhode Island instead of coming back to San Francisco. He says, you come back to San Francisco again. So I took the train. Now, at that time, you couldn't get Pullman. You had to sit. And it took 3 days to cross. Sitting there, I'm a buddy of mine from New York. I went all the way back to San Francisco again. 4 days later, they shipped me to Newport, Rhode Island. Luckily, they put you on a sleeper. So at least you could sleep going back. And it just so happened, it was on Christmas Eve, it was in December. We were in Chicago, and we thought, well, we can go into Chicago. they put us in the middle of the stockyards that you couldn't get off the ship, the train, and we had to stay on the train till we got to Newport. After I was a machinist mate all this time, working in a machine shop. Then they assigned me to the USS Wheatland, which was a cargo ship, and it was still being built in Brooklyn Navy Yard. Luckily, they said you're in charge of A gang, that's to make the fresh water and to take care of all the auxiliary pumps. I never even saw an evaporator. But machinist mate, you were supposed to be able to run milling machines, lathes, run the throttle, and also the auxiliary pumps. The ship was not completely finished, so I could follow all the water lines, and I learned in a hurry how to run the evaporators to make the fresh water. But all the time I was on the Wheatland, we went to, I don't know how many, it's in that book there, how many islands we went to. And we had to make the fresh water, and we also had charge of after steering. I forget the date exactly now. And we were in Pearl Harbor, we were loading up the Marines, and we knew we were getting ready to invade Japan. I'll never forget this night. We were sitting there on the deck, waiting for the movie to start, to get dark to see the movie, and all at once it comes over the loudspeakers, the Japanese surrendered. Well, I'd be very gun in the harbor went off. In fact, it looked worse when the war ended than when it started. But we had a lot more guns at that time, too. And every gun in the harbor was fired. But anyway, we loaded up the Marines. We go and takes, I forget which division of Marines it was, but we took the first Marines into Sasebo Harbor, which is the biggest naval base in Japan, and it's on the lower island of Kyushu. We pulled into the harbor there. While we're going in through, we could see the people there lining, mostly women and children. You saw very few men. We landed there, and while we were going in through, we see a big white sheet there. As we get closer, we look, and it has "Welcome Marines. Seabees have the situation well in hand." And you can tell that sign came down in a hurry. There, a tug of seabees pulled in ahead of us. And then we were noted the Marine Division there. They were the first occupiers of Japan. We left and went down to the Philippines. We picked up another load of Marines and took them back to the same place. Then we thought, well, now we're going home. So we come from there to Seattle, Washington for our first stop. When we got in there, we found out the Merchant Marine went on strike. They said you have to take a load of goods out to Guam. Well, we sure weren't happy about that, so we had to load up the ship again. We sailed all the way out to Guam. And I remember it was over at Christmas that we celebrated Christmas Eve down at the engine room. We unloaded in Guam. Then we left from Guam and we went straight to Panama. It took us 28 days to go from Guam to Panama. We were doing 10 knots. Go through the Panama Canal, head up to Norfolk. I buy my tickets to go home. That same evening it comes over, all machinist mates will be transferred to destroyers and proceed to Trinidad for war maneuvers. If I wouldn't have only had 6 months to do it, we would have been over the hill. But I figured I'd better stick it out. So I was transferred. I had to cash in my railroad ticket. Went on the destroyer, we proceeded to Trinidad on war maneuvers. And I'll never forget, that's when the song Drinking Rum and Coca-Cola in Trinidad was popular. While we were down there. And we were drinking rum and Coca-Cola too. But anyway, we come up farther north to near Puerto Rico, and we go into war maneuvers. And that's the first time I was on a destroyer then at that time. Now in war maneuvers, the destroyers are in here, and the battleships are out here. And we were shelling a small island in Puerto Rico for practice. And notice that the Missouri fired at 16-inch guns, and you could stand, you could see them shells going over you and into the harbor. But they're out 16 inches and about that long. You could see them go and land on the island. Well, after the war maneuvers were over, we go all the way up to Maine, and we stopped at all the little ports coming down through. This was during peace. I know we had a march in Newport, Rhode Island, and then we pulled into New Jersey. Finally got down to Pensacola, where we were plane guard. At that time, we didn't have helicopters. So whenever an aircraft carrier went out, a destroyer always followed, and if the plane went overboard or didn't land all the way, you went after and picked up the pilot. After helicopters came in, well, they did it themselves, but when we were there, we had to go pick up the pilots. Then while I was there, they said, now you can go home. So I finally got a leave. It was only my second leave in 6 years that I got to go home. Came home in July. And I had to go back to Pensacola again. And I served my last, that was in July till November, when by the time they sent me to Philadelphia on delayed orders. I went for my discharge papers. He says, well, you can't get them right now. You still have to take 60 days leave. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, you can go home, but you won't get your discharge papers till January. Well, I didn't care about that. I got home anyway. So when I'm ready to go out, they say to me, now you want to join the reserves? I said, why do I want to join the reserves? It says, well, if you join the reserves, if you come back in, you have the same rate that you have now. I said, I didn't want that rate in the first place. So I got out all together, and I wasn't, most of them that did sign up were called back in again, and they ended up down in North Korea. So I was home for good. But anyway, that ended my career. And it was a good experience, but I didn't want to go through it again. Anybody have any questions?
First of all,
You said you were dressed in white in December? You said you were dressed in white in December? Or
Well, in Hawaii, yes.
In Hawaii you wore whites all the time?
As long as you were in the Pacific. You had blues. When we were in good condition, I spent all my time in the Pacific. I went to all my agreements.
What did you do after you
Out of the Navy? I think quite a few jobs. I was a painter before I went in, worked with a painter, painting houses and barns. I worked for him for about 6 months. I thought, I don't want to do this. So, I don't know if anybody knows Betsy Ross potato chips. It was from Richland. And I worked in the potato chip factory, made potato chips. But I had already enlisted in the Navy. You mean after I came out? That was before I went in the Navy, that I made potato chips. When I came out, then I went to work at the VA hospital. And I worked as a baker. Well, I didn't care much for baking. And part-time, I worked down at Farm Nursery then. And I really liked working at the nursery, so I quit at the VA, went and worked full-time at Farm Nursery. I guess I worked there about 5 years, and then I was working Saturdays and Sundays and the evenings. A job came out at Grandview Memorial Park for care supervisor. So I worked 17 years at Grandview Memorial Park and also up here in Harrisburg at, it's still there, the cemetery, Evergreen. No, not Evergreen.
Bowling Green.
Which one?
Bowling Green?
Bowling Green, that's it, I worked there. The same people owned both of those cemeteries, and I worked between the two of them then, till I retired.
Before we take any more questions, let's thank Mr. Shanaman for...
For those of you who are new, we do not charge dues. We pass the World War II medic steel pot.
Yeah. Okay, so questions for Ned. We have a few. Yes, sir.
Were any other sailors wounded or injured on the Medusa there?
Medusa?
Yeah.
No, we were lucky. We had nobody injured.
Yes, sir. Gentleman back.
What can my generation do better to honor you?
What can his generation do better to honor World War II veterans?
I don't know, I think we were one of the, yesterday was at the VA, Sunday I was at the VA, and I think we were honored.
We got discharged.
Discharged for good.
We're still here anyway.
When, at the time of Pearl Harbor, what was the feeling among the sailors, the soldiers that you knew and talked about as to why did this happen, and why were we caught unprepared? Was there much scuttlebutt about that?
Well, talking about that, well, let's say a week before, we were sitting up on the boat deck talking, and one of the fellows from North Dakota, we were saying how well we are protected and everything. He says they could come in here and bomb us and we'd never find out about it. Don't talk like that. We're well prepared and everything. 3 weeks later, we found out we weren't. We were very surprised. And they still wondered who gave the orders to return to port. After we were supposed to be out until a week before Christmas.
The returning planes from the Enterprise, were those pilots injured?
They were all killed except the one that owned it.
And what was your final rank when you got discharged?
Machinist made first class. And they promised me they'd make me chief if I stayed in. I said, you can have your chief.
Going back here.
Yeah, if you were mechanically inclined, but I wasn't.
Gentleman back here. Go ahead.
Is it true that the ammunition was locked up at the time that the attack took place?
At that time, the ammunition was always locked up. It wasn't after that, but before that. In fact, some of them had a fight to get a key to open the magazine, and some of them broke the lock.
Was that just on weekends that it was locked up, or
No,
every day?
all the time, unless you, when you came into port, all the ammunition was put in the magazines until you went out to sea again. Then they brought it up to the magazine.
You got some liberty gains.
After the war started, we didn't go into Honolulu anymore. all you saw was white uniforms. We did anyway, we stayed most there. They set up a recreation center right in the harbor for the sailors, and we just went over there, drank our 2 bottles of beer, and came back to the ship.
One more back here.
I just want to add a personal note. I know what you went through when you tried to join the Navy because the same thing happened to me. I went to the Marines and they told me to go home and grow up. I was 15. I went to the Navy. I went to the Marines. I had a cavity in a tooth and they wouldn't take me. I went to the Navy and they told me to grow up. I went to the Army. I was signed up for the Army. I was enlisted at 9:30 in the morning. At 1:30 in the afternoon, I was in the ship headed for Panama.
Where did you go then? Where did you go from there?
They found out I was underage and they sent me back to Fort Lee, Maryland. But I didn't get out.
Anybody else? Yes. Have you been back to Pearl in later years? Have you returned?
That morning I told you, 4 of us were renting a taxi cab to take a trip around the island. It would take you nearly all day to go around and see the sights, and that's what we were going to do. But 5 of 8, Liberty didn't start till 8. So 25 years later, my wife and I went out and I took the trip around the island.
I have a question on what you want to do and everything. You see all these other countries have all these big guns and protection and on their shore and everything. What do we have in this country? We don't have no protection. They bomb the White House and all this. How do you feel about that? Do you think we should have more protection, more guns in different areas? I mean, things have changed over the year with radar and everything, but you see what happened in New York and stuff. I don't think it ever changed.
I don't think a lot would like what I think of. I say bring our troops home and protect our shores. We're spread too thin and wide.
So when in other countries, is that correct?
Yep.
We never learn from history.
2 stories. Tell the gay story and the fish story.
What's the first one?
It's gay. It's gay.
Oh, excellent. The Navy took over the Royal Hawaiian after the war started, and that's where the submarine crews stayed while they were in port. And if you served 2 years there, you were allowed 3 days in the Royal Hawaiian. So I and my buddy, we were out at the Royal Hawaiian, and there, one day we see 2 MPs coming with a guy in the middle, and they were taking him through there. We thought, wonder what meeting that they had to have 2 MPs guarding him. Here we found out later it was Ensign Gay, Torpedo Squadron 7, I think it was, 8. Oh, do you know him? Anyway, they went during the Battle of Midway, and that was the only Torpedo Squadron man that came back alive. And they were questioning him. And they kept him on the guard until they could interrogate him.
The fish.
Oh, yeah. There was nothing to do in those islands, but in the Navy, they gave you 2 bottles of beer every 4 days. But to drink that beer, you had to go ashore, because you were never allowed any drinks on the ship. So this was done in New Guinea. I and my buddy go over there, we drink our 2 bottles of beer, and we're walking down the beach there. Oh, once I thought I saw something that after a while he looked, he said, "Did you see what I just saw?" I said, "You mean that fish climbing that tree?" Yeah. I said, thought I started seeing things like too much to drink. No, he said he did it. Here, he thought, well, we're not saying anything to anybody else. I don't think something happened. Here we were reading Ripley's Believe It or Not book. And in there it had a fish that can climb a tree. You know, hey, we saw that thing. There it came out of the water, across the beach, and went up this tree pathway. And then he read it, it could stay out only 15 to 20 minutes before it had to get back in again.
What kind of beer were you drinking?
That's what we thought too. And actually it was stronger. We had just been to Sydney, Australia, and their beer is stronger than the American beer. In fact, they have their quart is bigger than our quart. So everything else was
You
good.
had a 3.2 beer, you know, on the show.
Yeah.
Next question.
Yeah, you said you didn't like while you were in, but it was a great experience. What is your opinion of having a draft for the kids today?
I'll give you a second one. I think it'd be a good thing. To teach the young ones, you can't just do what you want to do sometimes. You have to take orders. It's only my opinion.
I have yet to talk to a veteran that doesn't feel the same way.
To me, it was a real good experience to learn, especially boot camp. You couldn't believe it. And like, same with us, we went to Newport, Rhode Island, and it was November, and I don't know if anybody was there at Newport in November and December, and we slept in hammocks. And these things, they were tied up to get in your bunk. You had to jump up and pull yourself up in your hammock. You were that high. You could walk underneath. And one guy fell out. You had to learn how to sleep in that hammock. But like I say, out at sea, the hammock was a great thing. You didn't, when the shipwreck, you stayed still. Of course, they did away with that before long.
Did you have the hot water treatment while you were in?
The what?
The hot water treatment with your head?
I know. At boot camp. I know.
Did they have King Neptune's court when they crossed the equator?
We didn't at that. We were all by ourselves. And we couldn't believe that they'd send a ship without an escort or anything our size. And I think even the captain was a little nervous that we never bothered with them when we crossed the equator.
Yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I was interested in your feelings about the Japanese that you shared with me. Would you like to share with the audience?
Well, when we got into Japan, we were the first ship in there. And we couldn't believe you saw very few men, but the women and the children were there, and the children came after us for Hershey chocolate. And the women, they bowed to you every time you passed, and they treated us great. The children would always run up to you, they want this chocolate, and we didn't like it. I don't know if any of you ever drank it. I drank 8. That Hershey chocolate was mostly paraffin, but colored chocolate. But the Japanese children liked it.
What about your feelings for the Japanese in general? Just your opinion, but I was interested in that.
Well, most of us look at it when we went into Japan. A lot of them people didn't want to do it any more than we did. But you have to follow your leader sometimes. They were told to do this, or like we were told that you fight them. So we didn't blame the civilians on that there. And we fraternized with them just as if they were our own. And they treated us nice too when we went in. The men finally came up. The second trip when I came back, then there were a few more men there. But the one you can believe too, like Sasebo, was the biggest naval base. And you could see there were bombs all around. And in the distance, and I have pictures of it somewhere, there were 3 doors. And you wonder what those doors were. When we went up to them, and there's a big mountain in the back there. You open one of those doors, you could drive Mack trucks and anything. These were big machine shops in there. The whole thing was cleared out. You would have thought nothing happened to any of the machinery in that in there. So like I said, they bombed the harbor there, but they weren't hurting any of their equipment.
I think when the atrocity started coming out in the public, I think the feeling then was the only good Jap is a dead Jap. I think that was the feeling I had anyway.
Well, it was at first, yes. After we went in there, though, and we found out how they treated us good. That you sort of lost that, oh, the more you Pearl Harbor, I would have shot any Jap that came around.
Yeah.
But,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
but like I say, after we went in there and I saw how they got down and everything, like, you sort of lost the hatred.
I don't mean to put you on the spot again, but you shared with me your feelings on the day of Pearl Harbor, your feelings as you were sitting there after the attack. I was very moved by that. I was just wondering if you,
Well,
students.
After the attack was over, we all just sat there stunned. And I was sitting there wondering too, I thought, how can people come and kill each other like that? To me, I would have never thought of going killing somebody else, but once they start coming at you like that, I guess you figure you can. But I still can't see it. Why one group wants to fight another group all the time.
Any other questions, students? Any of the young folks? Anything on your mind? Yes, sir.
What would you say then makes it? What would you say makes it a valid reason to attack a country? When should we defend our nation?
So your question was?
Sorry, I'll rephrase that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. When?
Take your time.
Yeah. Thank you. When should we be allowed to attack a nation who has already attacked us? If it's a preemptive strike from another country, when should we decide to then retaliate?
Very general question. What makes retaliation and going to war, in your opinion, what necessitates, or what is just cause for going to war between nations? Any thoughts?
I don't see any reason for it. I mean, again, I'm not a big Christian, but I cannot see it going out hurting somebody else or trying to kill them, especially.
Yeah.
Preemptive strike. When do we go to war?
When?
And his question was if a nation has a preemptive strike against us, when do we go to war? That was the question.
Well, yeah, I'd retaliate right there. You almost have to. Or they just run all over you, yes.
I think one of the things that made the War in the Pacific so brutal was their code of honor, the way that they believed war should be fought, particularly the samurai code. And there was just a program the other night on the military channel, and they interviewed one of the fighter pilots that had attacked Pearl Harbor. He was not aware until several years ago that war had not been declared on the United States. They thought that they were attacking within their understanding of a honorable war. As you probably know, everything got botched up by the Japanese not getting the coded message in time to take President Roosevelt. So when he walked in there, the attack had already commenced. But when you were there, one of the things that occurs later on is the court-martial of Admiral Kimmel and General Short. How do you feel about that? Do you think that they were responsible for that, or they were...
They were railroaded. If you read back between Washington and the Philippines, they were communicating back and forth and skipped Kimmel and Short. But they didn't know what MacArthur knew more what was going on than Kimmel and Short did. And MacArthur left all the planes sit there after the attack, and they destroyed all those planes. Explain that.
Well, I guess the biggest mystery is, was it luck that our carriers were not in harbor at the time of the attack? And what did you guys in the Navy think about that at the time?
I think we were lucky they weren't in port. They were all headed for port. Well, there was only two of them, the Enterprise and the Lexington. The Saratoga was back in the States already in dry dock. So we only had two out there. And they were both headed for Pearl Harbor. Luckily, the next morning the Enterprise pulled in alongside of us.
You would have thought, though, that the Japanese would have put out reconnaissance planes and located the carrier. They found them, or they sent them out and they couldn't find them?
You take, we had a lot of warnings before that private Lockhart with the radar. He even called back to headquarters that a group of planes is coming in, and it's bigger than just a bunch of B-17s, but they ignored it. The destroyer Ward sank a two-man submarine 6 o'clock in the morning. They wired back in that they sank a submarine, a foreign submarine, they didn't name it. But they had a big party at the Royal Hawaiian, the big shots, the admirals and the generals, the night before, and they didn't want to disturb them to tell that news. We should have been ready for it. In fact, I think they knew the attack was coming. Marshall, you couldn't find him for how many hours after the attack. I think they knew that it was coming.
I have a question back here. You were the first ship into Sasebo, Japan, after the surrender. Were the people there aware of the atomic bomb and what had happened to them?
Yes.
The women and everything, they knew what was there? What had happened?
Yeah, they knew what happened.
You know where the Yorktown was, 107. The sister ship to the Enterprise. They were identical.
York, it was still over in the Atlantic when the war started. It only came over to the Pacific after the war started.
Final questions? Okay. Once again, let's give that a...
People that are newcomers tonight that want to get the postcard, we mail a postcard every month. If you're not getting the postcard, give us your name, address, and phone number here.
If anybody gets the paper, or for those of you who don't, up front here, everybody, leave the helmet here. Ned's story appears in the Patriot News tonight. 4 individuals who were at Pearl. We were to have another speaker tonight, Hank Heim from over in New Cumberland, and he couldn't be with us. We were going to have 2 different viewpoints. He was at Hickam Field, but read the story. He'll join us in the spring sometime and talk about Pearl, where he was wounded, a bomb fell on him in Lowe's, as well as his 75 missions in the 15th Air Force. So Hank will be, he has shingles, and he couldn't be with us tonight. His health was up and down, and he opted to sit this one out, but we'll have it in the spring. I also want to ask, excuse me, Ned, if anybody here would like to speak. I know some of you guys come up and tell me of people, or you have your own interesting stories. You see how very informal it is. We're always looking for speakers, or if you know of somebody, please let me know. I have a card, and we're certainly happy. Bill and I were also thinking about, not to scare you guys off, but maybe to have, and ladies, but really to have a World War II roundtable in the truest sense, where we meet each other, talk about experiences, talk about our interest in war histories, World War II history, maybe a relative or neighbor or somebody, or of course many of you were there, and certainly we'd be interested in hearing what you have to say in terms of sharing your experiences. So that does it for tonight. Please come up and meet Ned, and look forward, thank you for coming, and look forward to you again in January. January speaker is to be